All right, let's move into Kalen DeBoer. Is he finished as the Alabama head coach? I think essentially are his days numbered? How hot is his hot seat? Because it's clearly hot right now. Are the boosters going to force him out after year two? What are we thinking here right now after this loss to Florida State?
Yeah, so this is by far one of the topics that I was most excited about when we started marking stuff down. I think it's so funny, like watching like the Paul Feinbaum show or just anywhere you can find SEC like rants. There was one post on ESPN where this guy was just going off on Kalen DeBoer and saying that they were gonna go in with pitchforks and knives and just like protest like his whole existence essentially. And I think that we're getting pretty close to that being like a reality with Alabama football. Alabama football has been in such a good place for such an extended period of time. I saw a graphic on ESPN saying that this is the lowest they've been ranked in like 15 plus years, whatever the graphic is. They're just never this bad. They don't lose the first game of the season. I don't think they've lost their home opener or just opener in general since like 2001 or some crazy stat like that. They're not used to this, and it is kind of like refreshing to see as a college football fan of any other team, because no team is that good for that long. And obviously Nick Saban had so much to do with that. And now they're facing like just what feels like to be a regular team. But I mean, how hot is Kalen DeBoer's seat? If he doesn't put together, if they don't make the playoff, he could be on the way out, which
Wow.
is crazy to say because they already have one loss going into a tough SEC schedule.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the SEC schedule. I'll get to that in a second. First off, never follow a legend in any sort of career. I hate to be like running away from a challenge. I sound like the opposite of Damian Lillard here, but I almost feel like it's impossible shoes to fill.
Well, it's
And
how good that worked out for Dame.
yeah,
Sorry.
it's impossible shoes to fill, and it's just making the playoff is a just in my opinion, with the way that this team looks right now. I know they started 8, now they're all the way down to 21 in the rankings, but it just almost feels like that was too high of an expectation going into this year. Obviously, they shouldn't have lost to Florida State just based off of the guys that they had. Florida State, I think, is going to be obviously improved from 2-10 last year, but this team is still better than that Florida State team, you would think on paper. Obviously, we saw them play on the field, so not so much. But the expectations, I think, were a little bit too high for a legend. And it takes time to put your own imprint on a program. And I definitely think 2 years is just not enough. And looking at the schedule the rest of the way, it might be too far-fetched for this team to make the playoffs, especially already with that Florida State loss. They got Georgia in a few weeks. I don't even want to skip over the Wisconsin game because of what just happened to Florida State. I think they're going to be awake for Vanderbilt, but that's there too. Mizzou at some point maybe potentially could be ranked. I'd have to take a look at their schedule before they play them. Then you got where it really gets tough. Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU. We just talked about Oklahoma. I don't think that Oklahoma is going to be ranked potentially by that point, but I'd have to take a look at their schedule as well. Then they end Eastern Illinois, Auburn. I mean, am I penciling in losses for Alabama at this point? I don't know if I'm going down with the ship. It feels unusual to talk college football and not have Alabama at least be penciled in for some good wins over some decent SEC teams. But I'm thinking South Carolina, Tennessee, LSU. That is maybe potentially when this will get really loud. If that stretch is 0-3 going into Oklahoma, I mean, my goodness, that could be 4 losses there. I think I see at worst this team could be 7-5. I think that could draw some concern. But at the end of the day, you need a little bit of time to build the program. And with the transfer portal, NIL, it sounds like a broken record. Everybody in college football just talks about how it's an ever-changing landscape, but it is. And to build your program, even at Alabama, it's going to maybe take at least 2 years.
Yeah, but I just don't think that a lot of people are going to give him that time, especially given the fact that he starts off his head coaching career, not inheriting, but like obviously he helped with this recruiting class. But then he gets the number 2 recruiting class in the nation, right? Ryan Williams is a part of that recruiting class, and there's just a bunch of other 5 or 4 stars a part of that class. And then this past year, in his full first year of recruiting, he had the number 4 class. So like these are players that can get it done. And then where, if they're not getting it done on the field, where are they looking to? It's obviously the head coach. So it is unfortunate that he followed up such a legend in Nick Saban, and it was just gonna be tough to fill his shoes, like in any means, but like you got to make the playoff. And especially with the 12-team playoff this year, or like not this year, but the last couple of years, it's tough to look at Alabama and say that they're not going to be in it. So I don't know. Like I think the floor, like you mentioned, is definitely like could be 5 losses. They have a ton of tough games. Obviously, like you mentioned, Georgia on the road, South Carolina also on the road. They get LSU, but they're the number 3 team in the nation right now, and that's at home. But still, the SEC is always going to be tough, and I think that like they might have to look to not redshirt freshman, true freshman Keelan Russell for like some motivation, because Ty Simpson was unfortunately uninspiring in his first start as an Alabama quarterback, and Keelan Russell was not only the number 2 quarterback in the nation, but the number 2 player in the nation. So do they look there at some point during the season if things aren't going right? They might have to.
If there wasn't so much noise too about how he's running the program, I feel like the perspective would be a little bit different, because I know that there's a lot of different viral posts going around on social media about maybe how he's conducting mental health within the program. And then, I think Caden Proctor had his phone on him when in warmups, he like had it on in his hand. That like there's different stuff that people are looking at where it's like this wouldn't have flown under Nick Saban, and that's where I get to the expectations of just maybe he's moving this program into a way that they can win, but with these younger players. And Nick Saban, you just don't challenge Nick Saban, as a player or anything like that. But he was even able to kind of move a little bit into the direction that college football was moving. And I think Kalen DeBoer potentially kind of took a further step, but they're losing. So a lot of people are taking a look at that, and it brings a different perspective with that. I know I'm speaking more in generalities, but there's something to that, I think, as well, where people don't have an issue with the way that you're running the program if you're getting wins. And then obviously if you're losing or you lose your opening game, people have an issue. I think I saw a stat where Nick Saban only had 4 losses to unranked teams during his time there, and now they already have 4 losses to unranked teams under Kalen DeBoer. If this gets cleaned up as the season goes on, I think the chatter will die down.
Yeah, so I actually have that stat right in front of me. It's from 2007 to 2023. Alabama was 119-1 against unranked teams, and from 2024 to 2025, Kalen DeBoer 6-4. So it's also like, as an Alabama fan, you like pencil in a lot of wins, right? So like you're just not supposed to lose some of these games, and to an unranked like team coming off 2 wins, obviously it is FSU. They have rebuilt a lot. They got a new quarterback. They essentially rebuilt their whole offense. So instead of DJU, they have somebody that's actually viable. But still, like, you're looking at FSU, you're coming in as 2 touchdown favorites. You're saying you're going to win that game, and when you don't, that raised a lot of questions, because FSU was like maybe the 6th hardest team on that schedule this year. So yeah, it's just unfortunate for Kalen DeBoer that he stepped into such a big role, and it's unfortunate that the way he was coming off of his time at Washington too, because he had a couple great years at Washington. He led them to the national championship. He immediately comes off that, gets the Alabama job, and the shoes are just very big to fill.
I'd have to take a look. I'm guessing Kalen DeBoer was never a Saban assistant coach or a disciple, but I know that there's probably going to be a lot of people, boosters maybe specifically, be like, we want to hire in-house. I mean, it just kind of sucks when you see a ton of these different coaches all around being from the Nick Saban coaching tree, and then having not brought in one of them, or not got the chance to bring in one of them. You see them all succeeding at other programs. Maybe that's a little bit misleading, right? Because he probably had, Nick Saban did the 4 losses within his first 2 years. Like, maybe there is a sense of when this starts rolling, maybe he does have a couple more losses to unranked teams. Obviously, I know that sucks to hear for Alabama fans, but maybe there is a success path if it does happen, where those 4, 5, 6 losses to unranked teams happen in the first 2 years, and he doesn't have another one for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Like, that is maybe potentially how it happens. I'm not saying it's a completely misleading stat, because it's definitely cause for alarm, but that could be something that I think is worth taking an extra nuanced look at.
Yeah, I just don't even know if he has those 5+ years that we're talking about here, because we'll see how the end of the season goes. But I think that if it does hit the floor of 7-5, it could get really bad. Like, I know that, like, my general statement before was him not making the playoff. I think that I can maybe relax on that a little bit. Like, I don't know that he gets fired if they miss the playoff, but if they're just barely making a bowl game as Alabama football, it could look pretty bleak for Kalen DeBoer.
7-5 is rough. I think
Yeah.
8 wins is necessary here, and then regroup next year.
It also depends on who you lose to at this point too, right? Because if you lose 4 games, but Georgia is a win at Georgia, then that makes the season look a little bit different. Or if you can get a South Carolina win away, that looks a little bit different. Or even LSU at home. But if those losses, like they play Vanderbilt again, if that happens 2 years in a row, that's
I think you need a loss later in the schedule for that to really be in the minds of a lot of people. And then for them to just point at the game and say, that's the Alabama that we know. If there's a game like that, I think that can really help his case, because maybe we haven't seen that just yet.